Hello and welcome back to New Vegas, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the throwing knives, a weapon that not a lot of people even realize is in New Vegas because these things are so dang rare to actually get. So the throwing knives are one of the few throwing weapons in the game, but they're definitely not the most popular and they're definitely not one of the most common. That would probably go into throwing spears that are the most common and likely the most popular too. Throwing knives are extremely rare and you can only really buy them from a couple of vendors around the wasteland. So you're probably not going to be finding these very often, especially if you're not paying attention, because certain vendors sell them, like Crimson Caravan can sell them, Mick and Ralph can sell them, there's a couple of other people that can sell them, but most people don't sell a whole lot of these. They sell like 5 to 10 of them max, and you're going to need quite a lot of these to make them really effective since they're definitely more of a spam weapon than anything else. This is also kind of a weird weapon to talk about because I didn't know if I want to include other throwing weapons in this, but I feel like we'll just keep this video to the throwing knife. We'll include all the axes in one video, we'll include all the spears in one video, and yeah, we'll just do that for the throwing weapons. This one's kind of like the oddball out. So the throwing knife requires 0 melee to use effectively and only 1 strength. So any character can use throwing knives effectively, which is pretty awesome. These are also a normal sneak-in weapon. I believe Mr. Holdout on the strip actually sells these. So you don't even need any sneak, you can just sneak these in regardless of your sneak level, which is pretty cool. The throwing knives do 15 damage per hit, which is fairly low, but it's not the worst for a melee weapon. They do 48 damage per second. You can actually throw these fairly quick at enemies, and it feels pretty satisfying to do so. This does 15 crit damage, so it's not super high there, although it does have a 2x crit modifier, so it has an extra chance of critting, which is awesome. On a melee crit build, this isn't too bad. This costs 20 action points to use, making it pretty decent in an action points build, assuming you get enough of these to actually throw them, but you can throw quite a lot of them in VATS. VATS with the thrown weapons does feel kind of weird though, because the enemies aren't always slowed down in VATS the same way you are, and sometimes that makes it so when your person would throw this, it might count as like throwing over something, or if an enemy is like really right up in your face, your person can just toss it right past them, and it seems to just like hit the floor next to them somewhere, so that can be kind of frustrating if that happens, as well as since this is a throwing melee weapon, it's not like regular melee where there's just the either you have a 0% chance of hitting or the 95% chance of hitting an enemy. This is based on limbs, so you don't just hit the entire body, you can actually pick where you want to throw this at it, so that can be kind of useful. These weigh half weight each, so they're the same as like grenades, which does also make them kind of awkward because you're probably going to want to carry a lot of these around, and whereas like grenades you can carry around a couple, maybe a dozen of them, and it's not really going to weigh you down. Carrying around like 20, 30, maybe even 50 throwing knives will actually weigh you down a decent amount. You can kind of help this if you have the perk Pack Rat. That does help because then you'll cut the weight in half. But even then, you're still going to be probably stockpiling a bunch of these to actually kind of make use of them. For the pros of these, they actually do have pretty good damage per second, and they are a sneak-in weapon, which is really cool. You don't need any perks or anything for it, or I guess up to level 50 with sneak with it, so that is pretty awesome. The major con to the throwing knives, though, is that they're extremely rare. You're going to have to buy these and then just like wait for shops to reset if you want to keep using them, or you're going to have to spawn them in like I did for this video, because otherwise it's going to take you forever to collect enough throwing knives to kind of make them effective in even just one combat situation against regular enemies. There's also some perks that can help with the throwing knives too. Certain melee perks do actually help with throwing knives, like Piercing Strike does. It actually gives armor breaking on this and all throwing weapons, so that is pretty cool if you want to take that. But then something like Super Slam doesn't affect these at all because you can't knock down enemies with the throwing weapons. So that one won't help unless you're going with a mixed melee build, where you're actually using regular melee and thrown melee, in which case then that one's still really good. I don't think Slayer affects these. I could be wrong about that. I haven't actually really tested it, but I don't think so because that would be attack speed and not really like thrown speed. Heave Ho does work with this where you can throw these further than you otherwise would, but there is something that's kind of bizarre about like throwing knives and throwing axes, and that's the way in which your person kind of throws them or the way in which they kind of tumble through the air. Because normally they'll throw them and they'll tumble end over end at an enemy, but after so long then they'll just start flipping to horizontally and spinning like this at an enemy. And it gets really strange, and the hitbox seems kind of wonky, especially in that like middle area where it's turning the weapon. I don't know why that is. It doesn't affect throwing spears, but it does affect throwing axes and throwing knives, so that's just something to kind of keep in mind. You could also take the trait at the very start of the game called Loose Cannon. This makes it so you can throw these faster than you otherwise would, and this goes for all thrown weapons like grenades and stuff too, but you do have less range with them, which again can feel really awkward with thrown melee weapons At least the knives and the axes, not so much the spears. Those are pretty consistent too. But it does get kind of strange if you're not used to that. So it might be something you want to take. It might be something you just want to avoid entirely, because I don't know of anybody that's just doing like a throwing knife only run unless you're spawning in a whole bunch of throwing knives, which could be very fun. But I don't see it working very practically in terms of like you have to run up to Mick and Ralph's, wait a while, and then buy whatever throwing knives they have, run over the Crimson Caravan, buy whatever knives they have, and just like keep cycling vendors as much as possible until you actually have enough throwing knives to start your playthrough. I guess you'd also need to have money for that too, which could be kind of an issue. And it makes it so throwing knives are kind of an awkward weapon to use in general. For an overall rating on my tier list, I would put the throwing knives into like D tier for practical use. They're not terrible by any means, it's super difficult to get enough of them to really make them work. If they were way more readily available, if you could buy a couple hundred from regular vendors, they'd probably go up quite a bit. They'd probably go up to like C or B tier because they're very fun to use and they can be decently effective, especially in like the sneak-in areas. It's just you rarely get to use them, if ever get to use them. I don't know of any playthrough that I've really done where I have gotten to use them when I haven't specifically went out of my way to get them. Throwing knives, kind of an awkward one. Tell me your thoughts on them down in the comments below though. I'd love to hear that. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. If you'd like to see any other videos like this, feel free to suggest them. Up next, we're going to be talking about an unarmed weapon, which is pretty fun and pretty strong. But if you'd like to see more of the throwing weapons, feel free to suggest them too. I'm going to go over all the weapons in New Vegas. Thanks everybody for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye everybody.